deep within the ancient and labyrinthine canals of Xochimilco, just a few miles south of the chaotic energy of Mexico City. There exists a place where the atmosphere shifts and the air itself feels heavy with the weight of 1,000 secrets. This is not the Mexico of vibrant colors and mariachi music that tourists usually seek. This is a world of shadows, of stagnant water, and of a silence so profound it becomes deafening. As you drift further into the dark, winding waterways, the vibrant life of the city fades into a distant memory, replaced by the rhythmic sound of a wooden paddle cutting through the murky depths. You are entering the realm of La Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls. From a distance, the island looks like a nightmare manifested in the physical world. As the mist clears, the silhouettes of twisted trees begin to emerge, but they are not bearing fruit or flowers. Instead, they are draped in the decaying remains of thousands of dolls. Some are hanging by their necks from rusty wires, others are nailed to the crumbling wooden fences, and many more stare out from the tall, yellowed grass with hollow, unblinking eyes. These are not the pristine toys found in a child's bedroom. They are weathered by decades of sun, rain, and rot. Their plastic skin is cracked and blackened. Their synthetic hair is matted with dirt and cobwebs, and many are missing limbs or even their heads. Yet despite their grotesque appearance, they were not placed here to terrify. They were placed here as an act of desperate devotion and protection by one man who believed he was haunted by a restless spirit. The story of this island is inseparable from the man who created it, Don Julian Santana Barrera. Over 50 years ago, Julian was an ordinary man with a family and a life in the city. But something inside him shifted, a calling or perhaps a fear that drove him to abandon everything he knew. He chose to live a life of absolute solitude on this small floating garden, a chinampa, away from the eyes of society. For a long time, Julian lived a peaceful, if lonely, existence, growing vegetables and seeking spiritual clarity. However, that peace was shattered by a tragic event that would redefine the rest of his life and turn this small patch of land into one of the most haunted locations on Earth. According to the local legends, shortly after Julian moved to the island, he made a gruesome discovery. In the dark, cold waters right off his shore, he found the lifeless body of a young girl. He tried desperately to revive her, to pull her back from the veil of death. But he was too late. The water had claimed her guilt, and sorrow began to consume Julian's mind. Not long after the girl's body was recovered, he saw a doll floating in the exact same spot where she had drowned. Convinced that the doll belonged to the girl and was a vessel for a troubled soul, Julian picked it up and hung it from a nearby tree. He believed that by displaying the toy, he could appease the girl's ghost and protect himself from the dark energy that had begun to settle over his cabin. He thought that one doll would be enough to bring him peace. He had no idea that it was only the beginning of a half-century descent into obsession. Julian began to hear whispers in the wind. He felt phantom footsteps following him through the mud. The spirit, he believed, wanted more. And so, he began his mission to find every discarded doll he could, searching through trash heaps and trading his own crops for old, broken toys. He didn't care about their condition. In fact, he believed the more broken and weathered they were, the better they could ward off the shadows. As the years bled into decades, Don Julian's mission transformed from a simple act of protection into a consuming, all-encompassing obsession that dictated every waking moment of his life. The island was no longer a place of agriculture or quiet contemplation. It had become a macabre cathedral dedicated to the silent and the broken. Julian was no longer just a hermit. He was the self-appointed guardian of a plastic army, a man who spent his days scouring the trash heaps of the mainland and navigating the debris-filled canals in search of discarded souls. He would trade the very vegetables he grew for sustenance for old mangled dolls that others had thrown away. He saw beauty where others saw filth, and more importantly, he saw power. To Julian, each doll was a soldier in a spiritual war, a talisman capable of soaking up the restless energy that he felt radiating from the dark waters surrounding his home. He began to treat the dolls as if they were alive, talking to them, cleaning them as best as he could with his calloused hands and carefully choosing the perfect branch or fence post for each one. He believed that the more weathered and damaged the doll was, the more experience it had in the spirit world, and therefore, the more effective it would be at keeping the drowned girl's ghost at bay. But the atmosphere on the island was changing. Visitors who dared to venture deep into the canals began to bring back stories that defied logical explanation. They spoke of a heavy, oppressive feeling that would settle over them the moment their boats touched the island's muddy banks. It wasn't just the sight of thousands of decaying faces staring through the mist. It was the sounds. People claimed to hear the soft, rhythmic creaking of the dolls as they swayed in the wind. But even on days when the air was perfectly still, the dolls seemed to move. Some swore they saw the dolls' heads slowly rotate to follow their movements as they walked past. Others reported hearing faint, high-pitched whispers echoing through the trees, sounds that resembled the giggling of a small child, only to find nothing but plastic and rot when they turned to look. The local boatmen, the Chinamparas, began to avoid the area after sunset, crossing themselves and whispering prayers as they rowed past the island. They believed that Julian's obsession had opened a door to a place that should have remained closed, and that the island was no longer just a memorial, but a portal where the line between the living and the dead had become dangerously thin. Don Julian himself seemed to be slipping further away from reality. He told the few visitors he received that the dolls were his only friends, his loyal companions who protected him from the mermaids and the dark spirits of the water. He claimed that the girl's spirit was not alone, and that the canals were filled with the echoes of those who had been lost to the depths over the centuries. His eyes, once clear and focused, became wild and haunted. He lived in a small, cramped cabin surrounded by his most precious dolls, the ones he believed held the most power. He slept surrounded by their hollow stares, convinced that if he stopped adding to his collection even for a single day, the protection would fail and the shadows would finally claim him. The island had become a physical manifestation of a tortured mind, a place where the barrier between a man's internal fears and the external world had completely vanished. The climax of this haunting tale reached its peak in 2001. 50 years after the girl had supposedly drowned in a twist of fate that seems too cinematic to be true. Julian was found dead by his nephew. The cause of death was a heart attack, but it was the location that sent shivers down the spines of everyone in Xochimilco. Julian's lifeless body was discovered face down in the water, in the exact same spot where he had claimed to find the drowned girl decades earlier. It was as if the water had finally come to collect its debt. Or perhaps the girl's spirit had finally decided that she no longer needed the dolls to communicate with him. Julian's death transformed the island from a local curiosity into a global phenomenon of the macabre. Today, the island of the dolls remains as a chilling monument to one man's descent into madness or his ultimate sacrifice for spiritual peace. After Julian's passing, the dolls were left to the mercy of the elements. Nature began to reclaim them, with vines wrapping around their plastic limbs and moss growing over their faded features. This natural decay has only added to the horror, making the dolls look like ancient organic entities born from the swamp itself. Thousands of people from all over the world travel to these canals every year, drawn by a morbid curiosity to see if the legends are true. They walk through the narrow paths surrounded by the silent, judging eyes of Julian's army, and many leave behind dolls of their own as a tribute or a plea for protection. But as the sun begins to set and the shadows stretch across the murky water, a familiar feeling returns to those who remain too long. The feeling that they are being watched, the feeling that the whispers are real, And as the wind picks up, making the thousands of dolls creak in unison, one can't help but wonder if Don Julian Santana Barrera is still there, somewhere in the mist, still tending to his dolls, still trying to appease the girl who never left his side.